Greetings from the Lafayette College Archives. I'm Elaine Stomber, College Archivist, and this presentation is entitled From Secret Societies to Sororities, The Origins of Greek Life at Lafayette College, 1832 to 1980. We can trace the roots of the Greek system at Lafayette College all the way back to its earliest days as a manual labor school. The first secret societies, the Washington and the Franklin Literary Societies, had their origins at the Germantown Labor Academy, which was the predecessor to Lafayette College. Their members came to Easton with the first president of the college, Dr. George Junkin, and held meetings in a farmhouse on the south shore of the Lehigh River, even before classes started in May of 1832. When the college moved to its current location on the hill in April of 1834, the secret societies moved too. At that time, all students, the faculty, and the president lived in the same building where classes were taught. This building has evolved over the years through fires and renovations, and its foundations lie under what we now refer to as South College. Our earliest secret societies, the Franklin and Washington Literary Societies, were the first form of extracurricular activity to appear on the Lafayette campus in the 19th century. Their importance to the student community was tremendous at a time when Greek fraternities did not yet exist on campus. Certain characteristics of the later Greek system could be found in the literary societies, such as rivalry and competition, great secrecy about meetings, and the rushing of the freshman class each fall. And perhaps most importantly, both the Washington and the Franklin Literary Societies provided young men at Lafayette College with an alternative to purely academic study. As literary societies, the groups also perform many important functions for the college in general. They provided the only early library facilities and books. They brought the English language and English literature to their members in an academic environment where only classical languages were taught. And they provided extracurricular activities for the community of students. Even with impressive names like Washington and Franklin, and even with their literary mission, they were still secret societies. They had passwords for entry. Badges were worn by their members, similar to fraternity pins. The transactions of their meetings were secret, and their extensive minutes were open to no one but members. Rivalry for membership was intensive, and debate competitions between them were as serious as sports rivalries from later years. As far as we can tell from our early records, there were no objections to these first secret societies. College officials even gave the literary societies their own rooms on the third floor of the new building on College Hill. So why then did the appearance of new secret societies bearing Greek letters immediately cause alarm for college officials in the early 1850s? The main concern was national identification and allegiance. A local Greek chapter at Lafayette could be part of and under instructions, possibly at variance with college regulations, from the headquarters of a national organization run by some unknown figures not connected with the college. There was also the concern that the tie to the society would be a lifelong commitment, like a competing religion. College officials were concerned that this commitment to another national organization could undermine Lafayette's organizational structure and its control by the Presbyterian Church. In 1857, most of our trustees were clergymen, nominated by the Presbyterian Synod of Philadelphia, and had very definite prejudices against what they viewed as secret, semi-religious organizations. Another problem was that the new Greek secret societies were founded by students in a spirit of rebellion. This was a period of strict discipline at Lafayette, where young men were treated as boys by a patriarchal organization. The academics could be dull and repetitive. Our faculty taught mainly Latin and Greek through recitation, and the only extracurricular activities organized by the college involved religion, In other words, mandatory chapel and church services. But it was the famous class of 1857 who finally brought the Greeks to the attention of the college. They were a badly behaved class, exploding fireworks in classrooms, frequently displaying intemperance, and showing defiance to the faculty at every opportunity. They even broke into Professor Francis March's room and tore pages from his grade books. Some of you may be familiar with this image of Francis March. There's a large painting hanging in Party Hall to this day that is based on this photograph. It was the members of this class of 1857 who instituted the first two Greek letter fraternities at Lafayette. These groups were organized in complete secrecy and obtained chapters from national fraternities without the knowledge or consent of the college. Phi Kappa Sigma was the first in 1853, although it quickly became extinct. Even though Phi Kappa Sigma was revived many years later, Delta Kappa Epsilon is considered the first fraternity at Lafayette. DEAC was established in 1855 and remains on campus to this day. The first 10 members of DEAC crossed the Delaware River to meet secretly at a hotel in Phillipsburg. Both students and faculty knew that this fraternity existed, but the members remained unnamed. This is an early engraving in our collection depicting the DEAC Row chapter rituals. When the seniors in 1857 offered to print the annual college catalog because the college could not afford to do so, they included the insignias of two of the fraternities on the last page. The catalog came back from the printer after the students had gone home for Christmas break. One of the ringleaders of the class, a DEAC named Alexander Tripp, who we see in this slide, later told this story. There was, in the end of the catalog, a statement occupying about 2 pages, setting forth the control of the Presbyterian Synod and the excellent moral and religious influence over the students, which their parents and friends read with great pleasure. Then, on turning the leaf, they saw to their surprise on the opposite page the Maltese cross of DEAC and the skull and crossbones of the badge of Phi Kappa Sigma. There was a terrible to-do in college about our catalog, and the faculty were in a state of high excitement over it. Needless to say, the faculty and the trustees were not amused. The catalogs were recalled and destroyed, and the class of 1857 was required to reprint at their own cost the catalog without the offending symbols of the fraternities. At the next faculty meeting, the professors resolved, hereafter the catalog will be published by the faculty alone. One quick aside, Special Collections and College Archives does have one of the few remaining copies of this original catalog, which you can see right on this slide. Until this prank with the college catalog, neither the faculty nor the trustees had taken an official stand on the presence of the fraternities on their campus. The trustees' solution in 1857 to the problem of the presence of Greek societies was severe. They ordered that each new student, upon matriculation, sign a pledge that he would not join any secret society. Today, matriculation is more informal. Essentially, a student matriculates when they accept an offer admission by Lafayette College and send in the matriculation fee or a deposit to reserve a spot in the incoming freshman class. But in the early days of Lafayette College, matriculation was a ceremony in which the student not only inscribed his name in the official college register, he also was required to take an oath of submission to college laws. This oath of submission was really a remnant of the feudal system, where each new tenant was required to take an oath of fealty to the lord of the manor. This slide shows one of our early matriculation books in the college archives. So the board built into the matriculation ceremony this new pledge not to join a secret society. At first, they also wanted incoming students to swear before graduation that they had not broken the oath. The faculty actually objected to the second provision and urged the board to drop it. The requirement was revised and published in the catalogs for the next 2 years. The instructions read, By a resolution of the Board of Trustees, every student is required to sign a pledge that during his college course, he will have no connection with any secret society without previous permission of the faculty. Few students seem to actually have signed this pledge. In fact, one student deliberately petitioned the faculty for permission to join DEEC. He was, of course, turned down. For about a decade, the college struggled with enforcement and considered abandoning the pledge. Approximately half the students continued to join these secret societies, and new chapters grew rapidly. Zeta Psi in 1858, a short-lived chapter of Iota Alpha Kappa in 1863, Theta Delta Chi and Sigma Chi in 1867. They still maintained secrecy, meeting in rooms downtown, and continued to protest the pledge whenever efforts were made to enforce it. William Herberton, member of the class of 1865, described the procedures for attending fraternity meetings secretly. We usually went downtown around 11 p.m. singly so as not to attract attention, and slipped through side streets to where we met. There were private knocks at the hall door, and the doorkeeper must be assured of the person entering before he was admitted. Then we did not leave the meeting in a bunch, but one or two at a time after the lights were out. But even with all of this secrecy, the meeting places were generally known or suspected. A renewed effort in the academic year of 1866 to 67 on the part of the trustees and the faculty to enforce the anti-fraternity pledge resulted in a crisis. Students organized several days of disorder over the Independence Day holiday of 1867. For 3 days, all sorts of pranks took place on campus, including the following. President Cattell was mobbed by students while walking across campus. Then all the benches in the chapel where the sophomores sat were removed and destroyed. Professor Coleman's cow was found on the 4th floor of South College, and the police had to be called to regain order to the campus. 12 students were punished, and in order to prevent the development of a new tradition, the trustees rearranged the college calendar to place Independence Day in the summer vacation rather than in the academic year. Although both faculty and trustees blamed the disorders on the secret societies, they were beginning to realize that the pledge was not going to make them go away. The board continued to urge students not to join secret societies because of their evil influences, but they did allow those who protested or those whose parents protested to not sign the pledge. The pledge requirement was dropped and no further actions were taken against secret societies, and of course, their numbers increased. 2 new chapters appeared in 1869, Phi Kappa Psi and another short-lived one, Upsilon Beta. The brothers began to live in groups of adjoining rooms in the new residence halls along what would become known as Dorm Row. They began eating together in eating clubs and visited their downtown meeting rooms openly. And in 1870, fraternities were finally permitted to appear in the Melange yearbook. Here's an early photo of a Phi Kappa Psi brother's room where he openly displays his membership. But even though the brothers no longer had to hide fraternity membership, the adversarial relationship between students and faculty and trustees had become the traditional norm. Now I'd like to take some time to talk a little bit about our eating clubs during the 19th century and how they related to fraternities. From the very beginning of Lafayette's existence on College Hill, there was an eating club. The very first one was located in a room over the blacksmith shop in a small outbuilding. Board cost students 90 cents to $1 a week in 1832. As the student population grew, more and more eating clubs were established. During the period when fraternities were operating as secret societies, brothers were careful not to eat together as a block in an eating club in order not to raise suspicion that the eating club was a front for a fraternity. The clubs had non-Greek names like Brown Bread, Utopia, the Campus Club, and the Cottage Club. An entry in the student yearbook from this period states, "The eating clubs at Lafayette are simply that. They make no pretensions as social organizations. They simply supply the potential energy to every student, which reappears as perfect recitations, fine essays, and magnificent flights of oratory, not to speak of the rhythmicalities of athletics, which delight the eyes of the beholder." But once the trustees and faculty began to tolerate and recognize fraternities and new dormitories were constructed, brothers began living in rooms more or less segregated on floors and began dining and eating clubs that were maintained solely for individual Greek letter organizations. And by the end of the 19th century, the names of the eating clubs began to transition and reflect their ties to fraternities. Here you can see that the list of eating club names has transitioned into fraternity names. The last mention of eating clubs appears in the 1914 Melange yearbook. By 1915, the eating clubs are no longer existing because fraternity meal plans are taking over. And this reflects the next major change to Greek life at Lafayette, the construction of fraternity houses. As was the case in many colleges and universities across the country at the turn of the 19th century, Lafayette's growing Greek population began to lobby the administration for fraternity residence houses on campus. The first petitions to build chapter houses were submitted to the college in the early 1890s. The board postponed making a decision about their construction for nearly a decade, while Greek housing on other American college campuses was investigated. Concerns regarding construction standards, financial control, and the impact on the morals of the students were discussed by the board. By 1900, the continued rise in enrollment caused an acute housing shortage on campus, and college president, Dr. Ethelbert Warfield, determined that the solution was to board students in fraternity chapter houses. The board appointed a fraternity house committee composed of Dr. Warfield and 5 fraternity alumni to develop policies governing the quality of construction and the financing of the new buildings. The board shifted its position on fraternity housing and began to encourage chapters to build houses by offering to help finance construction. This decision enabled the college to suspend construction on new dormitories for much of the early part of the 20th century. Only minor modernization and maintenance of a small number of existing residence halls was required by the college for many, many years. The last of the old dormitories was East Hall, built in 1874. Despite the increase in student population, no new dormitories were built for 50 more years until Easton Hall was constructed in 1925. During this 50-year period in the college's history, all new housing for students was provided by the fraternities. By 1916, 12 national fraternity chapters had colonized at Lafayette, 9 of which were permitted to build large residences on campus. But they were subject to the same rules of deportment that governed the students in college residence halls, and the specific point was made that there would be no liquors, women of immoral character, or gambling in the chapter houses. The first fraternity house on campus constructed was by Deek on Marchfield. The application for the site was made in June of 1900, but the house was not built until 1904. Other fraternity houses soon followed. Throughout much of the 20th century, Greek letter fraternities dominated the social life of the college. As a result, other than intercollegiate and limited intramural athletics, the college contributed little to the extracurricular life of the campus. Freshmen were introduced to the Greek system even before arriving on campus, sometimes rushed by fraternity members as soon as they arrived at the Lehigh Valley Railroad Station in downtown Easton. The Intra-Fraternity Council, or the IFC, was established in 1916 in an attempt to bring order to the rushing system. The IFC drafted rushing agreements endorsed by all the fraternities, regulating rush during the first semester of freshman year. All prospective fraternity men were required to visit a minimum number of houses on and off campus and investigate their options before pledging. At this time, the best living and dining accommodations available to Lafayette students were in the fraternity houses. The majority of freshmen joined the Greek system and eventually moved into the chapter houses. Those students who remained independent found it difficult to participate socially and politically on campus. The organization of a student council in 1922 provided independents with only a limited voice because most of the members were fraternity men. Fraternity members also dominated student publications and clubs. By the 1930s, Greeks represented approximately 60% of the student population. Besides providing room, board, and extracurricular activity for many Lafayette students, fraternities offered another important service to the college during this time period. Greek chapters kept their respective alumni actively involved with the college and developed much of the alumni donor base. Because fraternities were so successful in mobilizing their alumni to return to campus for reunion, the college did little to develop alumni relations and postponed the appointment of an alumni secretary until 1928. Fraternity alumni also played an important role in the management of fraternity chapter houses, thus enabling the college to remain involved in student housing on a limited basis for many years. The college relied heavily on the volunteerism of alumni fraternity brothers who incorporated to build, purchase, or rent residences for much of the undergraduate population. Alumni fraternity corporations managed the finances, housekeeping, and renovation of these chapter houses. In 1940, the Board of Trustees granted permission for a local fraternity, the Towers, to become the 19th National Fraternity at Lafayette College. This non-sectarian, predominantly Jewish fraternity was subjected to nearly 10 years of study by the board before it was permitted to go national as Pi Lambda Phi. Along with the approval of Pi Lambda Phi, the board resolved that no further national fraternities be permitted to colonize at Lafayette, and the total number of chapters remained at 19. Just as the Greek system at Lafayette College was maturing, World War II hit. As with many colleges and university campuses across the country, the major blow came to enrollments in November of 1942. The draft age was reduced from 20 to 18, and in less than a year, there were only 225 students left at Lafayette College. With a reduction in the student population, Lafayette became one of the 36 academic institutions selected by the War Department as training centers for engineering and aviation cadets. So as civilian student enrollments dropped, enrollments in military programs took their place. Our campus became host to 5 military programs where enlisted men could receive training. Activity in fraternity houses dwindled during this time. Despite the fact that much of Greek life became dormant during this period, growing concerns of the faculty regarding the fraternity system and its negative impact on academics were voiced in a report prepared by a college post-war planning committee. Many faculty members believed that early rushing and hazing created an anti-academic atmosphere for students. Discussions of reforming the Greek system were postponed as the war ended, and the college's need for living space was reinforced. Students left the armed forces and returned to campus in large numbers during 1945 and 46. And once again, fraternity houses provided much needed rooms and dining facilities. Under the administration of President Ralph Cooper Hutchinson, the first non-Greek letter social living groups such as Souls Hall, Watson Hall, and Kirby House were finally introduced in the late 1940s. While some fraternity men feared the competition of these alternative social dormitories, the student population settled around 1,500, and the 22 living groups remained the norm for many years. During the academic year of 1957 to 58, the faculty attempted to impose a delay on fraternity rushing because of increasing concerns about the average academic records of their members. These were consistently lower than all college averages. But the board observed that delayed rushing could not be instituted until adequate commons, particularly dining facilities, were provided for freshmen. The last year of first semester rushing took place in 1959, when 67.5% of the freshman class pledged a fraternity. The opening of Markey Hall in 1960 as a freshman residence, commons, and cafeteria finally enabled the college to move rush to second semester of freshman year. As a result, freshmen could spend the first semester evaluating fraternity life before pledging in the second semester, while continuing to eat meals in Markey Hall for the entire academic year. After this change in rush, the number of independent students grew, but still remained a minority. After coeducation in 1970, the college increased its student population to 2,000, and in time, the number of male to female students equalized. Coeducational residence halls and residential suites were opened, and membership in several fraternities shrank. While 5 fraternity chapters lost board recognition due to low memberships, most lost standing because of delinquencies. As the number of fraternities decreased on campus, local sororities began to form. The board surveyed national sororities, and in the spring of 1980, the first 3 were officially colonized. The local sorority Beta Gamma was organized in February of 1977 and became affiliated with the national Sigma Kappa in February of 1980. Sigma Kappa was the first sorority to be permitted to live together in a house on campus, originally in the former infirmary on Sullivan Lane, which is where the Fishers now stand. Kappa Kappa Gamma also started as a local sorority, Gamma Tau Delta, in 1978 and became nationally affiliated in February of 1980. Unfortunately, we don't have a photo of those pioneering Kappa Kappa Gamma women in the college archives. So if you are one or if you know one, please contact us. Pi Beta Phi was the 3rd sorority to become nationally affiliated in March of 1980 and was previously known as the local sorority Delta Psi. Of course, the Greek system at Lafayette continued to evolve after those first 3 sororities were successfully colonized in 1980. By 1992, 6 national Pan-Hellenic Conference sororities were present on campus. I'd like to close this presentation today by thanking you for taking the time to learn more about the origins of Greek life at Lafayette College. For a deeper dive, check out our web exhibit, Lafayette College and the Greek Experience, originally prepared by Professor Emeritus of History and Archivist Albert W. Gendebien. This online resource has been updated to include a directory of Greek organizations at the college, as well as many original documents from the archives. And of course, I welcome your feedback and encourage you to contact the archives with all of your questions about the history of Lafayette College. We love to hear from our alumni. Thank you and enjoy reunion.